Hello everybody and welcome back to Bring Your Own Popcorn, and welcome to day number 7 of the 12 Days of Christmas, where I watch and review a Christmas film that I have never seen before. And in today's episode I'll be watching and reviewing the remake of Miracle on 34th Street. So in the last episode I watched the original Miracle on 34th Street and I quite enjoyed it. I gave it a 7 out of 10. There were some things I didn't like about it, but on the whole I thought it was a good film. And I'm really excited to get into the remake today because I actually feel like the remake is a little bit more popular, not necessarily critically, but in terms of what is watched at Christmas time, I feel like the remake's a little bit more popular with audiences. When people seem to reference Miracle on 34th Street these days, they seem to be talking about the remake and not the original. I do know this film gets mixed reviews, whilst the original Miracle on 34th Street is really critically praised. This one got more mixed reviews. I think it's got like a 50-something% on Rotten Tomatoes. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this one to see if it lives up to the original, see if it can even compare to the original film. I do know more about this one than I did the original. I do know Richard Attenborough and Mara Wilson are in it. Richard Attenborough is a fantastic actor. Mara Wilson, I think, gets a lot of slack. I do think she's a pretty decent child actress. And I know it's from a script by John Hughes, so I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit of that John Hughes humour throughout the film, because I really love John Hughes. I think he was a fantastic writer. So without further ado, let's crack on and watch the remake of Miracle on 34th Street. Okay, so here we go. Miracle on 34th Street, released in 1994. I knew it was the 90s, but I thought it was the later 90s. I think the original was 1947, so a good bit of time between the original and this one coming out. So it's the kind of the same description as the first one. 6-year-old Susan meets Kris Kringle, a department store Santa who thinks he's the genuine article. And it is 1 hour and 54 minutes long, so I think that's about 20 minutes longer than the original film. So I don't know if some of my complaints about the original film are going to be met in this movie, that it should have a longer court case sequence, and I said the film would have benefited from being a bit longer. So we will see. So let's crack on and watch Miracle on 34th Street.
Finds that Mr. Kringle is not who he says he is, then I would ask the court to judge which is worse. A lie that draws a smile?
I knew it.
Or a truth that draws a tear?
This season, 20th Century Fox, Richard Attenborough, Elizabeth Perkins, Dylan McDermott, and Mrs. Doubtfire's Mara Wilson present you with the most precious gift of all.
Okay, so I just got done with the remake of Miracle on 34th Street, and I thought that it was actually a fairly decent remake. Whilst I do think that it is probably slightly worse than the original Miracle on 34th Street, and this is not a great film by any means, and as a matter of fact, I do have a fair few problems with it. I still thought it was a harmless, fun time. I thought it was a harmless, fun little Christmas film. It is, in terms of story, a really faithful reimagining of the first film. It really does follow the exact same story beats as the original movie. They do add a few new plot points in and extend/reduce some sequences, but overall it is the exact same film story-wise. And in doing this, it is a blessing and a curse for the movie. I think that the stuff that they redo in this movie is actually pretty well done and doesn't actually feel, as is the case with most remakes out there, it doesn't feel like just a pointless rehash of the first film. It's really well done, this stuff that they remake. However, the new stuff that they add in feels just rather pointless and quite lame, to be honest, in comparison to the stuff in the original film, because they remove some plot points in the original film and replace them with these new plot points, and they are completely lame in comparison to the stuff in the original. I normally like it when a remake takes its own direction, puts its own spin on things, and doesn't just copy the original film, and it's actually quite the opposite for this movie. And I feel like that's because the stuff that they are remaking, the stuff that they are doing again, they are doing in a fresh way, in a much more modern way. It comes back to the old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Some of this film has a surprisingly really dark tone. I think it was done to compare to some of the other children movies that were coming out around the same time period that had this much darker, sort of almost gothic kind of tone to it. And it just doesn't work in this film at all. It's meant to be a light-hearted Christmas film at the end of the day, and whilst that tone definitely works in some other children's movies that were coming out around the same time, it just doesn't work here. I feel like pointing out the darkness of humanity was not the correct route to go down for a light-hearted, fun children's Christmas movie. However, I definitely do need to praise some aspects of this film script, because some of it was really well done. I thought that the dialogue of the film was really nicely updated. It felt like a lot more modern than the original film, while still getting the same plot points across. The humour was definitely there, it was definitely present, and I liked how they did some different jokes. They didn't just do the same jokes again that the original film did. And yeah, the humour felt a lot more updated for a 90s audience and compared to a 40s audience. And I thought the jokes were pretty well done. Some of my complaints of the original film were attempted to be solved here, for example giving us a longer court case sequence. It's just a shame that the courtroom stuff comes across as a little bit too whimsical and a little bit too corny. It's very, very serious in the original film and I wanted a lot more of that. But in this film they go down a bit more of a whimsical route with the court case stuff, a lot more jokes being thrown out there. I didn't like that as much as the original stuff, so even though they did extend the courtroom sequence and make it a much more present plot point, because it's so whimsical and corny, I stopped caring a little bit about it. So the script definitely had its highs and lows for me, but when it was good, it was good. Another aspect that had its highs and lows for me were the performances. I thought Richard Attenborough was just fantastic here. Again, it feels like he was born to play Santa Claus. He just plays him with such warmth and such happiness and such festive cheer, but also managed to get across a more serious side to Santa and almost exploring a more angry side to Santa at some points. And I thought this was all greatly pulled off by Attenborough. However, even though I am a bit of a defender of Mara Wilson, I liked her in Matilda, I liked her in Mrs. Doubtfire, I even quite like the movie A Simple Wish with Martin Short. I think she's fine in that movie. She wasn't great here. She definitely has nothing on Natalie Wood's amazing performance of the same character in the original film. Elizabeth Perkins and Dylan McDermott were also good in the film. It's just a shame that their characters weren't written as well as the characters in the original film were. The film attempts to explore the relationship a little bit more than the original film did, but it honestly just comes across as a bit rushed and a bit clumsy. I thought the film had a really good supporting cast overall. Robert Prosky was a real highlight for the movie, playing the judge. He was really amazing for the little time of the film he was in. He really stole the show for me, and he gives this fantastic speech at the end. The direction was also fairly decent in this movie. It wasn't anything incredibly special, but some of it was shot really nice. Something that I noticed about this film that it might seem like an obvious thing to do, but a lot of Christmas movies miss this, especially more modern Christmas films, is giving the film a nice warm colour palette when inside to give you that warm, cosy feeling of Christmas, but giving the film a nice cold colour palette when outside to give you that juxtaposition. A lot of films really, really miss this, and I thought this film done that very, very well. Whenever the film was shot inside, it had this nice warm glow to it, and whenever it was shot outside, it had this blue kind of tinge to it, which really was a nice juxtaposition. It honestly made me feel so much more Christmassy. The film also had pretty nice cinematography. There were some scenes that I thought could have been shot a little bit better, but on the whole the cinematography was fairly nice, and the shot selections were pretty good too. However, some scenes were just shot a little bit blandly. They could have been shot in a much more interesting way. I noticed this a lot in the opening of the film. Like, the parade sequences they could have been shot in a much more interesting way, but they are shot just kind of run-of-the-mill and standardly. Also, the opening titles to this movie absolutely sucked. They looked horrible. I actually thought the soundtrack was really, really good in this film. It had a real nice score to it, to the point where I thought that this was John Williams. Like, when this score started over the opening titles, even though the opening titles looked horrible, the score was beautiful. I went on my phone and I googled who done the score for this film, because I was sure that it sounded like John Williams, and it wasn't. So I can't remember the name of the guy that done the score for this film, but they done a fantastic job. Overall, whilst I did have problems with the remake of Miracle on 34th Street, and I don't think that it was quite as good as the original film, I still thought that it was a fine, joyful film to get you into the Christmas spirit. And in terms of comparing this film to the original, whilst I do think the original is slightly better, it is very, very slight. I would give the remake of Miracle on 34th Street my recommendation and a 6 out of 10. But that's just my opinion. Please let me know yours. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was just alright? Please put down in the comments your opinion. I love to read your comments, and I try and respond to every single one of them. Please join me back here tomorrow at 6 PM for day 8 of the 12 Days of Christmas, where I'll be watching and reviewing for the first time a Christmas horror movie, Krampus. Thank you guys for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, all that jazz. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.